Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and today I wanted to talk about, is Reno a problem? Is there a Reno problem in Hearthstone, and why it might not be what you think it is? Which is, yeah, I'm gonna have maybe a bit of a hotter take. Hope you guys have an open mind to it, but there isn't a day that goes by where I go to the Hearthstone subreddit and see threads like, does anyone else feel Reno Lone Ranger needs a tuning? And we're gonna go over why I do think it needs a tuning, but again, not particularly in the way you might think. And if you enjoy the content on the channel, if you like, have earned your subscription, please hit that sub button down below, give the video a like. It helps us out a lot as we're on the road to 80,000 subscribers. So I always see these threads every day. Does Reno need an adjustment? But if you look at like the Hearthstone meta, you know, HS replay, you can look at Vicious Syndicate reports, you can look everywhere. There's a common trend when you look at like, this is just Diamond through Legend. This is even top 1000 Legend, where you'll know there's not really a single Highlander deck other than Highlander Hunter's always up there. It's a deck I never see anyone play, and I never see anyone complain about either. It's a weird one, but ignoring that, you don't see a single Highlander deck, a single deck that just runs singletons. Top 1000 Legend, it's even more narrow. Again, you don't see it, but do you? We'll talk about that in a second. And if you look at the card itself in the Hearthstone meta, it's by far not the most popular neutral out there. Only in 25% of decks, so 1 in 4 decks you face. And that's Diamond through Legend will face Reno in it, but isn't that weird? Like, no Highlander decks are top tier. Why are you facing Reno so much? Again, we'll talk about that. But yeah, the usual suspects, Astalor back to #1, bumping that Cobalt Miner just barely. Curious to see if it's like that at Legend 2, or nope, Cobalt Miner has fallen off. Unbelievable. But yeah, you see it's not quite up there. But there's kind of this thing that just drives me crazy about the card and wanting to play Highlander decks. I actually really like playing them. They're fun. Being able to play like a Dr. Holiday, for example, and get that weapon that might get Vipered or whatever, or get Infinite Dragons. The only Highlander card I don't like right now is Bran, because if it is good, it just wins the game, and that's not super fun. Whereas the other ones typically either give you a value bomb or just do really cool stuff. Whereas Bran is double. We know what double battle cries does, especially with Astalor. That's a card that I don't really want to see be super competitive, but it kind of is at times. And the thing I wanted to talk about, the Reno problem, isn't so much the card. I think its effect is fine if you solely building a singleton deck and you get that Highlander Payoff. You're already playing at a massive downside by playing one of cards. Believe me, it's a problem to play one of cards. We'll talk about why in a second. But the problem with the card isn't really that. It's the decks that it keeps popping up into that run a lot of duplicates. Remember, Druidstone was a problem before they got murdered in the last patch. And one of the things that really carried that deck, we're looking at the Mill Druid deck that had like Due Process, which got nerfed, and Pendant of Earth, which got nerfed, and Shadow Reflections, which got nerfed, and also Cactus Construct, which got nerfed. But the problem is, look at that. Reno Lone Ranger is active, is present in a 40 card Hearthstone deck. Not 30, 40 card deck, and was reliable enough to be active in the late game that you could copy it with your fizzle and clear Reno after Reno after Reno. And this trend has continued, where lately control warriors like Odin control warriors or Baran control warriors, they're not playing the Highlander package anymore. They don't bother. If you look, Meaty hit rank 1 with this Odin OTK warrior. Look at who's in this deck. And sometimes, actually quite often, active on turn 8, because there is so much draw in this deck that, yeah, Reno becomes active in a deck full of duplicates. And back in the day, back when Reno Jackson, this guy was a meta card, know what wasn't super prevalent in Hearthstone? Cheap card draw. The game has changed fundamentally since that period of time. So if the deck said, you know, your deck has no duplicates, you basically couldn't play a cycle heavy deck to get that Reno active. And plus, Reno wasn't as powerful as a Reno Lone Ranger. It cost less mana and all of that. Wasn't a big board clear. But the game has fundamentally changed then. But the wording on these cards hasn't. So you can just rip through your deck and draw it. And these decks are less inconsistent. They have better ways of winning because they have duplicate cards, right? You're not reliant on that brand. You see brands not even in this warrior deck that runs Reno. So basically you get the upside of that, you know, Reno Highlander Payoff card without going Highlander, without the huge downside of what these Highlander decks are going through right now. So you look at the Highlander decks like Highlander Shaman, Highlander Warrior, Highlander Paladin, all negative win rate. But for those decks, they are really built around, they have to be, that singleton condition, right? You have to run one of each card to really utilize those effects because you're not ripping through your deck really fast and then doing all this other good stuff on top of it. And one of the big problems is, well, naturally in the meta right now, Plague Death Knight is one of the most popular decks out there across all ranks. It has a like 11% play rate. So if you are playing a deck, any Highlander deck, you are basically guaranteed almost, because if you look at any of these Highlander decks, take a look at Highlander Warrior. What's its worst matchup? Plague Death Knight. We take a look at Highlander Paladin. Apparently it's worse against Highlander Warrior, but if you look at the matchups and you look at Plague Death Knight, it's like almost unwinnable. It's always horrible matchups. So you're throwing like 1 in 10 games guaranteed pretty much just to play that strategy, whereas the decks that, like, you know, the Mill Druids of the world or the Odin Warriors, they could still win with their Odin, they could still rip through their deck, but they could also get that benefit of Reno later in the game. And to me, it feels really, really bad that my deck can be hard countered exclusively by just somebody playing a deck against me. Like, what other times does that happen in Hearthstone? It's super rare that another deck just auto beats you. Like we used to have back in the day, Armor Smith and Shield Block auto beat Threes Mage. Way back in Classic, those polarized matchups happen, but those are more matchups. This is literally an archetype that's super popular, super good, that automatically shuts these off. So what is my take on the Reno problem and what needs to change? Well, it's quite simple. I tweeted this out and I firmly believe this. Whether it needs to have a rebalancing of some of these cards, I'm all for it. But what I said, if it's kind of sad that Reno is seeing more competitive play, I mean competitive as in winning higher win percentage games. You saw the HS meta there, a replay meta that, you know, the strictly Highlander decks, other than Hunter apparently, are really just not competitive. They don't win on average. Let's see, play duplicate decks and actual Highlander decks. I really wish it was based on starting deck. My big thing that I would love to see fundamentally change with Highlander cards, and yes, this would shut off the basically the counterplay of plagues or shuffling in oils or whatever, but it says battle cry if your deck started with no duplicates. Very similar to like if your deck started with only odd cost cards or even cost cards, you get that upgraded hero power. If they shuffle in a card that, you know, does that, you don't lose that hero power, right? I just feel like this would not only mitigate these type of things where decks can just abuse and take advantage of a card that really is supposed to be about playing singleton cards. It's built with the downside in the idea that you can only run singleton cards. Because if you look at like a standard Highlander deck, you're already running at a disadvantage having only one of your best cards, right? Other than legendaries, because you can't have two. You got to run one of your best cards and hope to draw it. That is why the power level of said Highlander cards are higher. That's why they've been billed higher, because it's supposed to be less consistent. But when that goes away and there's no reason to actually run non-duplicates because you can play decks like this, like the Warrior deck we took a look at, it just renders it like it doesn't really go with the spirit of the card. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in the day, this card, Bad Luck Albatross, was really good. It was just a 3-mana 4/3. You would just throw it in your deck and would automatically just disrupt Highlander decks. Not nearly as bad as like a Hell Yeah, which just does it for the rest of the game, unless you're forced to run a bad card like Steam Cleaner, which you see in this Reno Paladin list. Nobody wants to run that card, but you're kind of forced to the way things are. And even then, it's no guarantee. You Steam Cleaner, and then they just shuffle more plagues, and Hell Yeah just keeps doing it infinitely. It doesn't even do the trick. I just feel like it really is time to change a card like Reno, like the newer Highlander cards. Maybe you can leave like Zeph and the old Renos alone, so it's like that in Wild where it's always been like that, but update them to be if your deck started with no duplicates. Again, maybe you have to rebalance Reno. Maybe it needs to be 9 or 10 mana if it's consistently active in those Highlander decks. I'm all for that. I understand that, but to play a deck that you're already playing at a disadvantage, a strict disadvantage of running singleton cards, and then having it automatically shut off by a counter strategy, or losing to that same card from the deck that's running duplicates that just cycles through like crazy because card draw is so cheap and so prevalent in today's game, and I don't see that changing. I don't think that's fair. I really don't. And outside of Bran, again, I think would absolutely need to be rebalanced. At 6 would probably be way too good. Like, again, and I just don't like that card because it says basically win the game if it's active. Again, you could rebalance the cards a little bit, but I really, at least that's how I feel. And I'd love to hear your guys' take on it, because not everything needs a counter. Not everything. Can I counter my opponent getting an excavate reward? Not really. They're going to excavate. They're going to get the reward, and that's cool. That's what their deck is built around. That's the fun part about it. They get to play their card, right? Like, there's the dirty rats of the world, but it's random. You could play around. There's the Theotars of the world. It's somewhat random. You could try and play around it. Typically, disruption you can play around in some regard. This, you just can't unless you run a steam cleaner and they don't shuffle in more crap right after, which is just, again, not really a fair situation. So anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Really interested to see if you guys agree, disagree. I think it'll be a very interesting debate down below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.